Here are the fantasy follows, top 5 waiver wire players to target for week 12 of fantasy football. The top player to target this week is Gus Edwards, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. With Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins unavailable for this Thursday night's game against Pittsburgh, Edwards takes over the backfield there, and he is certainly worthy of the top ad in what I consider not a great week for the waiver wire. But either way, Edwards, currently rostered in 28% of all leagues, not a great run of games, although you might only expect Edwards to be the main guy there for one, possibly 2 games. As I said, Pittsburgh, currently 31st. That is second fewest fantasy points allowed to the running back spot. Then Dallas, Cleveland, Jacksonville. Dallas at 16th most. Cleveland 23rd, and Jacksonville 6th. At number 2, it's Sterling Shepard for the New York Giants. Wide receiver currently rostered in 45% of all leagues. Giants coming back off a bye week last week. Shepard has averaged 8 targets over his last 4 games since returning from injury and has had 6 or more catches each of those 4 games. And a nice run of games for Shepard. Cincinnati, Seattle, Arizona, Cleveland. All 4 of those teams in the top 10 in terms of points allowed to the wide receiver spot. At number 3, it's Nelson Agholor for the Las Vegas Raiders, currently rostered in 19% of all leagues. Agholor last week versus Kansas City, 9 targets, 6 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. That was 20.8 fantasy points. He has had 1 touchdown in 5 of his last 7 games. A pretty nice run also for Agholor. The next 4, Atlanta, the Jets, Indianapolis, and the Chargers. The next 2 for sure. Atlanta allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot, and the Jets the 10th. At number 4, it's Robert Tonyan, tight end for the Green Bay Packers, currently rostered in 46% of all leagues. Last week against the Colts, 5 targets, 5 catches, 44 yards and a touchdown, 15.4 fantasy points. It was his first touchdown since week 4. A pretty good run of games for Tonyan. The next 4, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, Carolina. The Bears currently allowing the 9th most fantasy points to the tight end spot, and Philadelphia the 6th most. And then at number 5, it's Taysom Hill, quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, currently rostered in 43% of all leagues. Hill, last week against Atlanta, 233 yards passing, no touchdowns, but 51 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. This is the kind of the guy who you take a shot at because he could continue to produce great value at the quarterback spot. And some bonus names for this week, starting with Michael Pittman, the rookie wide receiver for the Colts, rostered in 44% of all leagues. Last week against Green Bay, just 3 targets, but all 3 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown, 16.6 fantasy points. A pretty good run of games. Tennessee, Houston, Las Vegas, Houston. Tennessee currently the 4th most fantasy points to the wide receivers, Houston at 12th, and Las Vegas at 16th. Derek Carr, quarterback for the Raiders, currently rostered in 36% of all leagues. Carr has been a little bit hit or miss this year, but as a potential streamer, I feel he should be on this list this week. Against the Chiefs, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns last week. But his run of games, Atlanta, the Jets, Indianapolis, LA Chargers, 3 of those 4 in the top 6. Atlanta currently allowing the most fantasy points to the quarterback spot. The Jets the 4th. The Colts are last. Then the Chargers are at 6th. A couple of deeper dives here. Denzel Mims, wide receiver for the New York Jets, currently rostered in 5% of all leagues. Mims, last week against the Chargers, 8 targets, 3 catches, 71 yards. That was 10.1 fantasy points. He has had 8 targets each of his last 2 games. And a pretty decent run of games. Miami, Las Vegas, Seattle, and the Rams. Miami at the 13th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Vegas at 16, but Seattle allowing the most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. The Rams, the least. And then Damiere Byrd, wide receiver for the New England Patriots, currently rostered in 2% of all leagues. Byrd, 26.3 fantasy points last week against Houston. He has seen 16 targets in his last 2 games. His run of games, Arizona, the Chargers, the Rams, Miami. That first game against Arizona, they are allowing the 8th most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Be sure to join us this Sunday and every Sunday for the TFF Live Sunday pregame show. Streaming live right here on our YouTube channel at 12 noon Eastern Time. taking you right up until game time, answering all your fantasy football questions, and getting you ready for your matchups each week. And we are the Fantasy Follow. We are a brand new YouTube channel this season. We thank you for being here. If you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button. Make sure you get those notifications for whenever we have new content. We're also on Twitter at the Fantasy Follow, and that's fantasy, spelled FNTSY. And you can send us your fantasy football questions during the week using the hashtag AskTFFLive, and we'll answer those questions live on our Sunday pregame show. Facebook / the Fantasy Follow, and our website, thefantasyfollow.com.